afar, and they sit together, and they contemplate on what is the meaning of life, and what is the nature of reality. And they decide, they have a confidence that they can learn something about that together, thinking about it together. And then he started giving a lot of his nice aphorisms. He did not say, let's start a fortune cookie factory. He said, let's be wise, compassionate, gentle, and let's make life into a holy rite, a ritual of graciousness, and let's live graciously and in harmony with the earth and with heaven. And he was a beautiful person, Confucius. He really was. And that's the axial age, that's what that's why Toynbee liked Buddha. He wasn't a Buddhist, but the reason he did was he looked in the 5th century before the Common Era, approximately, from the 6th or 7th to the 4th, that middle of that first millennium, what they called the axial age, Karl Jaspers and others. And he looked at that, and he saw that the founding energy of all the Eurasian civilizations began then. The Torah was collected at that time in Babylon. Zoroaster was happening in Persia at that time. And so the founding things were all going on at that time. And everybody was doing similar things. They were trying to get the kings to stop behaving like George Bush. They were trying to get the Brahmins to stop being sort of like nasty to the lower classes. They were, etc. There's a list of things that they were all doing in that axial age. And Toynbee noticed that Buddha got away with more than anybody else. We like to think Greece was great. We were doing great in Greece. Oh, we're so individualistic and so intelligent and rational. But what did we do to Socrates in Greece? The tenure? No. The hemlock milkshake. Why? For talking to the football team about maybe going to class and studying a little bit. And the Athenians wanted the football team to kill the Spartans. So we wiped them out. Far from being such an advanced culture, Greek was like backward. Read Gore Vidal's book Creation. You'll get a laugh out of that. And the Persians were more advanced, and the Indians far more advanced. Chinese were a little bit, and poor Confucius, he was like trying to find a place to teach. He got a little bit of a job with the Duke at one point, and then he told the Duke that of his local kingdom, and he said, look, you shouldn't have like dancing girls every day, all the time, and waste a lot of money on that. You get like all weirded out and dissatisfied, and you go crazy, and you'll act like Mao, and it'll be very bad. And so he was immediately fired, because China was too like uptight, at that time. But India was the place where Buddha was able to get away with it. Not because the Indians were so great, but they were luckier. They lived in a wealthier place. Why was Columbus trying to get to India? To learn yoga? I don't think so. He was going there because it had a reputation for its fabulous wealth, its spices, its jewels, its iron ore. It still does today. The Chinese want to go there and get iron ore. It has the huge iron, Lakshmi Mittal and so on. So India was and it was not deforested at that time and not overpopulated, and it was the most wealthy, gracious place, which is why Buddha decided to go there according to the Buddhist legend. Not because he wanted to live wealthily, but because where you have wealth, people have leisure. Where people have leisure, they want to think about the meaning of life a little bit. They're not dealing with immediate survival. And therefore, they can begin to develop their humanity through learning and evolve toward becoming some kind of higher being, a higher human being, a really human being, a realistic human being, a loving human being, a happy human being. That's why you need a certain infrastructure to be able to do that. And if some king is arresting and lynching all the mystics and all the dropouts and all the yogis, then nobody is going to be able to really educate themselves and develop themselves. So then Toynbee realized that just like, for example, 800 years after Buddha was able to create the Sangha in India, which means the educational institution of the monastic university that became the heart of the university in ancient India, 800 years later in China, there was enough wealth and enough leisure where people began to feel, well, there should be some monastery. Some people could be supported and have lifelong stipend to go and simply meditate and develop their insight and their liberation, psychological and intellectual liberation, and be like scientists of the mind and develop that wisdom that is the key to freedom. And so it took 800 years later. And then in Iran and Afghanistan and Buddhism spread like that as a system of education, not as a religious change for people as it's been wrongly interpreted, but enriching the different religions of the existing places, infusing with them and changing them actually. So that happened in Asia, and the Asian and actually this might only just now be possible for us to understand. We in the West, over the 40 years I've been teaching, I have taught classrooms of students for a long time who we want to learn about the wisdom of the East. Oh, it's so interesting. But then you come around to this kind of idea that 2,500 years ago, the center of civilization on the planet was not at all the Mediterranean. Actually, it was a relatively backward provincial place. Genghis Khan didn't even bother to conquer Western Europe. All they had was beer there at the time. And he had the wines of Persia, and he had like China, exquisite dishes of China. He didn't even bother. But we think of ourselves as always having been the center of the universe, but we've not been, you know. And so they want to come to the wisdom of Asia, but then when you say, well, actually the West has been backward until lately when we became the great pirates and went out through imperialism and colonialism and genocided people all over the place and stole a lot of their wealth. Did you ever see the movie The Mudlark, a black and white British movie from long ago, where this little Indian boy is a stowaway on a ship that moors in the Thames, and then he shimmies down the rope and he gets all covered with Thames mud and somehow crawls into Buckingham Palace or some palace and ends up on a throne, sleeping there, and he creeps into the palace and leaving a mud trail. And then these Indian servants who serve the queen come in, and they all scandalized because there's mud all over the fancy royal rugs. But then they see this little Indian boy lying on the jeweled throne, all with Indian rubies and diamonds and sapphires and emeralds, like a little Indian mud prince, you know. And he has a moment before he spanks him and takes him out and scrubs him up, which is in the theme of the movie. They kind of adopt him, actually, the cute ladies of the court. But before that, there's this sort of poignant not quite post-colonial moment, you know, about the nature of the Western wealth, which we don't like to think of. And we don't like to think of the fact that the fact that we conquered Asia in the time of Euro-American Empire is not a sign of our superiority of culture in any way, like Kipling's white man's burden sort of attitude. It's a sign of our barbarity, actually. They were the civilized, more gentle ones, and we were the bullies on the block. And therefore we beat them up and took their money. And then once we got that, and we got like relaxed, like quote unquote a bourgeoisie and a middle class built on the Asian wealth and trade, or not to mention the American genocide, the American wealth. We then started doing yoga, started looking for the meaning of life in a different way, started wanting to become enlightened and so forth, and actually repent, of course, the behavior of our ancestors. And gave them, and you in Canada are way ahead of us in America. You gave back Nunavut. What true civilization is, not our technological prowess, and not our power to destroy things. I mean, in the United States, I can safely talk about it, well, maybe there's someone from the consulate here, but you know, you hear these asinine things in America, it makes you just want to weep. Like, we have the greatest fighting force in history, you know, haven't won a war in 50 years. You know, like wasting trillions of dollars and doing war crimes and obliterating women and children. Nowadays in war, 90% of the casualties are civilians. And they go around saying maybe 15,000 Iraqis were killed when the Lancet Journal and Johns Hopkins have proven definitively over 1.15 million Iraqis have been slaughtered and there are 4 million internal refugees. And these complete asses keep talking about victory and we're going to win and we have the great fighting for. I mean, what is the, where did we get these people? Would you like to have some of them? Could we send them to Nunavut? Really? I mean, I'm sorry, but it's really embarrassing. I'm embarrassed to be well, a New Yorker is not quite an American, luckily. They don't accept us. They love it when our city goes bankrupt and Pat Robertson, they're all inveigh against us when our buildings get knocked down, you know. And they say that's God doing it, you know. Really. I mean, really. So, my point is that this civilization, it isn't that. Now, none of the Asian civilizations have ever been perfect. But if we look, what is our crisis on the planet today? And America is, of course, the worst symptom, but here is one too, a little bit in the trail of that, and that is militarism. We are completely caught by a disease of militarism.